So what I've been saying is that I think it's best to think of the path of growth, the path of Buddhism, you could say, or the path to a deeper life. Even these things like Buddhism are a bit, it's an ism. There's no word in Buddhism that translates as Buddhism. There's no word from traditional Buddhism that translates as Buddhism. That's a Western word, like Marxism and so on. It's not actually a very good translation of what we in the West call Buddhism. The Buddha used the word, I teach the Dharma. And the Dharma is one of a very rich meaning in Buddhism, but it means, very simply, it means the truth, capital T, and it means the way to the truth. And I think if you think of the path of what we're calling Buddhism, this rather clumsy word which sounds like, I don't know, totalitarianism or Marxism or Maoism and so all these other isms that the 20th century has been in some ways blighted by. If you think of it as a movement towards truth, and all of those genuinely helpful teachings, practices, symbols, methods that lead you towards the truth, that's a much clearer sense of what we're trying to do. And you could say that the Buddha basically teaches two paths, that as you practice them, at least this is how I've been reimagining it in my mind, as you practice these two paths, they come together more and more, to the point to which you can't tell which of these two paths you're practicing. So I was imagining it like those searchlights that they had in the war, but with two searchlights shining, and they gradually, the two beams of light blend into each other and then just become a sort of circle of light when they completely coalesce. And when they completely coalesce, they become the Buddha. That this figure represents our deepest human potential. It represents what happens if we work on our mind to the highest degree. Yeah. So first of all, you've got this path, as I was saying, I can't remember which week I was on when I talked about it, but first of all, you've got this path of love. Buddhism is primarily a path of love, by which I mean a path of love. Yeah, I didn't know. Well, I've just said what I mean. I told you I was a bit tired. And then you've got this path. I will say a bit more about it. But, he's making it up. And then you've got this path of wisdom. You've got this path of wisdom, and that you try and practice those two paths. And as you practice those two paths, gradually, you no longer know whether you're practicing wisdom or love. And there's a point to which wisdom and love become the same thing. And that point is what we call the Buddha. Yeah? Even then, the light carries on. It's not like those lights, go over each other and shine onto a building or something like that. Those lights carry on, but the lights are always together. For us, those lights come on and off, don't they? Sometimes we're a bit wise. Frankly, we're often not very wise. So that light flickers badly. Sometimes we're kind, generous, helpful, we make a contribution, we're courageous, we're calm. But quite often we're not kind, generous, courageous, calm, making a contribution, and so on. So that light flickers on and off all the time, yeah? What we're trying to do here at the London Buddhist Centre and any other centres is we're trying to help individual people have those lights on for longer so that they gradually become, I'm really milking this metaphor, they gradually become constant beams in our life, a path of love and a path of wisdom that coalesce into the Buddha himself, which represents who we really are. It represents our potential. The Buddha represents our highest potential, except for that language of potential could make you think that you could imagine that. The metaphor I always use is, if you asked an acorn what their potential was, they'd say to be a really like sexy, big kind of acorn, like a really highly polished, big, sexy acorn. Perhaps a bit of attitude. But, if you showed them an oak tree and said, actually, that's your potential, an acorn would say, no way, like a roundy, like a roundy, shiny thing. That's like great, big and sticky out, got green bits on it. You couldn't, an acorn couldn't possibly imagine that potential is within the acorn. And our relationship to the Buddha is exactly like that. That when we think of ourselves growing and changing, we tend to think of ourselves as a shinier, sexier, deeper, more loving version of me, if you see what I mean. A kind of improved me. Something in that, it's not completely wrong, but what I'm trying to say here is that actually our potential is much more mysterious than that. It's much more than we could imagine. Just as an acorn couldn't imagine being an oak tree. Yeah? So these two paths that we're trying to practice, and these are the paths that make our life worth living. They're the sort of things that if we live to and live for, when we die, we will feel that we've spent our time well. I think it's never been easier to waste time. It's very, very difficult not to waste time now. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I imagine what will I be like at my death. And no one will congratulate you at your death for how much money you made, how you managed to keep hold of your rational skepticism. No one says, the great thing about him is he really kept hold of his rational skepticism. No one will praise you for the deals, the dirty dealing that you did. No one will say, yeah, he was very argumentative, no one actually even particularly will praise you for the actual worldly achievements you've made. Because the people around you are kind of used to it, aren't they? No one's ever famous in their own family. Your own family just think, okay, get a grip. So no one will praise you for those things. What people instinctively praise you for and remember you for and love you for is the degree to which you manage to manifest in your life this path of wisdom and this path of love. That's what matters to people. It's your kindness that will be remembered, your courage, your thoughtfulness, your wisdom that will be remembered. Nobody will remember your bank balance unless they get it. Unless they get the house, in which case they might just remember that a little bit. Even when the Buddha died, his main disciple, Ananda, what he said, the Buddha is dying, he who was so kind. So it's interesting that the Buddha, who's his main disciple, who'd been with him all that time, what he mentioned is not he who's been so wise, he who's been so really, really clever at explaining how the nature of reality is, but he who was so kind. Because everything is really tested by whether you can be kind or not. In a way, unless it makes you more kind, more loving, there's no value to wisdom. It's like having a big bank balance and not spending it on anyone. So I've been thinking that these two paths can themselves be split into two. So this path of love and this path of wisdom, they both have an exterior dimension and an interior dimension. Yeah? In other words, we need to practice that exteriorly in our day-to-day life, both of those paths, and we need to practice them interiorly in our daily meditation practice. I think one of the reasons why retreats are so important is on retreats you have a much better chance at practicing those two things in those four ways: exteriorly, interiorly wisdom, exteriorly, interiorly love. Yeah? And the conditions of a retreat are set up to help you do that. That's one of the reasons why they have such an effect. So the exterior practice of love starts really with generosity. That, I think, is a kind of primary virtue. Quite easily when people talk about ethics, I think actually more and more when people talk about ethics and morality, they secretly mean sex, don't they? Everyone got a bit quiet. I think sometimes our morality can be so preoccupied with sex, as if that's the only thing to be moral about. But actually, from a Buddhist point of view, a much more concerning failure in someone is that they've not been generous. I've known people who I think are very deep and who've got a touch of wisdom, but they're not generous. And because they're not generous, nothing in their life seems to move. It's almost as if generosity makes the universe sort of start to move. From a Buddhist point of view, it's a much more serious failing if you're not generous than if you're a bit, I don't know, you've got various... Anyway, I won't go on about all the other possible issues you could be doing. I'll leave you to fill that in. But you can write a list on your way home. But not being generous is very, very serious indeed. Yeah. So the exterior path of love is firstly generosity, generous with your time, generous with your money, generous with your belongings, generous with your help, and so on. And when you're genuinely practicing the path of love, what you try to do more and more is concentrate in your life on making a contribution, a genuine contribution to your own life and to the lives of those around you. That's the path of love. Yeah. In every situation you're in, the practice is to try to contribute to that, not take away from it, not add a bit more negativity to it, not share yet some more opinions on Facebook, but to contribute to that situation. Yeah. So that the more you practice this path of love exteriorly, the more you love people, the more you go out to them, the more you listen to them, the more generous you are, the more you take trouble over them as much as you do yourself. Actually, without you noticing, that's becoming more and more like wisdom. Because the degree to which you do that, the degree to which you genuinely start to put other people equal and then even before you, the degree to which you genuinely imagine other people, yourself, your sense of yourself is being quietly, without you noticing, and being attenuated. And that itself is wisdom. Yeah? And I'll come on to what wisdom is later on. But the more I can genuinely give and genuinely help, without doing that for my own benefit, which queers it, the more I can genuinely love, the more I become wise, because you self thins. You get literally less preoccupied with self. So that loving others, being generous to others, without you noticing, as you develop that, becomes more an attitude of wisdom. Until eventually, your love for other people is so strong that the question of whether they're the same as you or different from you no longer matters. Your care for them is trying to get to the point where you don't make the distinction between helping them and helping yourself. And those of you who've done the Metta-bhavana practice, you see that in that practice. It's basically written into that practice. Of course, the interior aspect of this path of love is the Metta-bhavana practice. It's cultivating on a regular basis this loving kindness, this positive attitude to things, this creative response to what happens to you. And we need an interior path of love, a Metta-bhavana, including feeling love for ourselves, including acting in our own best interests, and feeling love for others. Because how you behave towards others very often is really a description of how you behave towards yourself. So if you can't listen to others, if you get impatient with other people, if you are quick to condemn them or aren't courageous in relationship to others, aren't willing to enter into a more vital communication, if you're tending to keep out of those difficult areas which actually you know could take the communication deeper, that's also an interior thing that you're doing. You're slightly keeping away from the depths of your own heart. Whatever we do outside is a mirror of what we do inside. if we can't relax with other people, often we can't relax with ourselves. But also, of course, if we can't relax with ourselves, we can't relax with others. So that's those two dimensions of the path of love. Could say much more, but that'll do for now. And then you've got these two dimensions of the path of wisdom. And what we've been saying through these 6 weeks is that really to live a fulfilling life, we need to be practicing. I've now made 4 different elements of a path, at least. You need to be practicing all of these, right from the start, right from the day you come here. If you're serious about fulfilling your potential, if you're serious about moving towards wisdom and love. So the exterior practice of wisdom is rather more gritty. It's a more difficult practice. So various things I was thinking that practice of wisdom. So any situation where your sense of yourself shows up very strongly. When you're in a meeting that you wish had ended half an hour ago, when someone criticises you, things like that where your sense of yourself really flares up. A while ago I was getting on a bus and somebody knocked into me quite strongly as they got off the bus. And that sense of, when in that moment I had this sense of, why is this guy knocking into me? Why is this guy knocking into me? But then I thought, actually, he's not knocking into me. He's just knocking into someone. The me part of it is my preoccupation with myself. All he's actually doing is knocking into someone. It just particularly bothers me because it's me. He can knock into other people, that's fine. But you know what I mean? We turn someone knocking into somebody into someone knocking into me. In fact, in Tibetan Buddhism, what they suggest for this practice is you go and stand in a busy square and you get yourself knocked into a lot. I mean, I'm not suggesting you try this at home. I hope you don't live in a busy square. But you just get yourself knocked into a lot. So you really start to feel that self-impulse of, why are people knocking to me, Or sometimes it's, if you're in an impatient mood, even people being in front of you in a queue in Sainsbury's, you start to get that, I can't believe, somebody counting out their change. I've got to go to the Buddhist Centre to do the Metabhavana. You're making me late for love. So the exterior practice of wisdom is really starting, first of all, to notice where this self-sense we have, but this is me, they're knocking into me, not someone, starts to flare up. Yeah. So anytime you react, anytime that you react either defensively or aggressively, really at best one would be, and this is quite a demand, you can see why we need to do a lot of meditation, a lot of retreats, a lot of mindfulness to do this. You'd really be trying to notice that unpleasant thing, that's what I'm trying to work with. That's what, from a Buddhist point of view, that's what's getting in the way of life. We get in our own way, we stand in our own way of life. So one way of practicing this exteriorly is noticing where your self-sense really flares up, where you feel aggrieved. Another one is where you take offence. There's lots of talk at the moment about people shouldn't give offence, but from a Buddhist point of view, taking offence is unethical as well. Someone can give offence, but you don't need to take it. That's up to you. Taking offence is again this flaring out of self, isn't it? It can be very painful when you take offence. Very easy to take offence. And if we're not careful, we'll create a science society where more and more people feel on the lookout for taking offence. Yes, in some ways. So that's another time where your self-sense flares up, is when one takes offence. So when you take offence, see whether you can notice that and feel how painful it is. And the pain of it is to do with egotism. It's to do with you believe that you're a really existing self, and that really existing self has been hurt. It's interesting that we can be hurt through our emotions. Most of us are hurt, not physically, but through our emotions. And it's amazing actually how painful that can be. And yet what has happened? It's interesting that we all use this metaphor of hurt. Does feel, and if someone's very harsh to you, really can feel like literally being hurt. And yet what hurt? How did it get hurt? Sticks and stones, etc. How did it get hurt? So what you're trying to do in this exterior practice of wisdom is notice that taking offence. And then you try to stay with that and investigate. So where's this me that's being hurt? Who's being hurt here? Who's getting knocked into? But you can see that to do that needs quite a degree of courage and reflection and positivity. Otherwise you get dragged into it if you're not careful. Yeah. Another way you could practice wisdom exteriorly is noticing your ambition. One of the things I notice about myself, I'm terribly ambitious. I'm ambitious in an English way, which means you pretend that you're not. Oh, nothing, no, I don't. No, I'm sure that won't happen. But underneath it, I'm very ambitious. I think ambition is quite an interesting phenomenon. If you experience I don't know whether you're ambitious, you will be, whether you experience in yourself, but very, very deep, you can't weed it out. Very, very instinctive, almost animal sense of I want to win, I want to succeed, I don't want to seem not to succeed. If I don't succeed, I don't know what I'll do, who will I be, etc. Ambition and there's something always ugly and point missing about ambition. You can postpone your life and the happiness of your life for some kind of ambition. They're often, nearly always abstracted, and the more your ambition is met, the less effect it has. So, I've been writing poems for a while, and I was reading a biography of Robert Frost, who won the Pulitzer Prize 4 times, which is, I think, one of them. It's the greatest poetry prize. I think it must be one of the most times anyone's ever won it, and it was never enough for him. He had a difficult, very poor childhood. He was phenomenally gifted. And at the end of his life, he said, actually, I don't really care anymore. All I want is to win prizes. A very tragic place to get to. And it was never enough. It was never enough. The more you feed your ambition, what happens is that the things that would have satisfied you a while ago, you just feel, well, of course I'm going to get that. So, that waves rise you got a while ago is no longer an achievement. You start to look at the next band, or that successful thing I did a while ago, yeah, well, that's whatever. I need to be able to do it twice as much. You get this law of diminishing returns. And you can get really trapped in that with ambition. There's something also good about ambition, because you need to use those energies. But if you're not careful, ambition becomes fully point missing. No one, again, at the end of your life, praises you for how many Pulitzer Prizes you've won, I'm afraid. At least they might do in the press, but those who know and love you won't. It doesn't bother them. They're used to it. Yeah. So you can see that the path of wisdom is very much tougher. It's confronting you with your own innate egotism, and it's trying to challenge you, challenge me, challenge all of us to see through that, because that egotism doesn't work. That ambition, that drive as a bit of ambition never brings what you wish. That taking offence never works. That revenge mentality never gets back at people. It doesn't work. Yeah. So the interior practice of wisdom is a practice of exploring this sense that it's just so innate to us, so innate that we don't notice that we've got it, that I really exist, and that the world really exists, and that time and space really exist. I am an object, as it were, in the world, like a very sophisticated computer, in a box called the world, and eventually the computer dies, and the box continues. And in that box are real things, time and space, and so on. That's our basic assumption. It's a nihilistic assumption. It's our basic assumption. It's actually a metaphysical point without us realizing it. We think that's a description of how things are, but it's a fully metaphysical position, like saying things are made by God. It's just that because most people that you know hold that position, you take it to be a fact. Just as if 200 years ago, we'd all take it to be a fact that God made the world, and that our job in life is to serve him. We mistake, in the modern world, beliefs for facts. We think that life ends in death. We think that time and space exist. We think that we exist as a separate individual. We think the world and matter exist. I mean, only a slightest brush with quantum physics and so on should really question all of those assumptions, but it's not boiled through, it's not simmered through to our lives. We still basically think we're in that world. Yeah? So the interior practice of wisdom is assuming that you're practicing the exterior practice of love, the interior practice of love, the exterior practice of wisdom. I don't think really it's very valuable to try to practice this interior element very much until you really feel that you're practicing those other three. But the interior practice is directly turning your experience to this self-sense we have. So as I sit here talking to you, I think of myself as a really existing person. I recognise my own voice, these are definitely my hands. I think of myself as a really existing person, and you're looking at me in this really existing place. Yeah. And in a meditation of wisdom, you start to question that. And I'll take you through it in a moment. We won't do very much of it, but we'll finish a bit later than normal. So I'll just take you through a really simple way of doing it. We might do more of it on some of the summer retreats this year. So the best way to do this meditation is to start with the most obvious. So you tune into your body, your direct physical sense. And again, you don't need to think about your body. Your body isn't a thought. You tune into that. And you remind yourself that your body is not me, it's not mine. Yeah? So, you feel your knees on the ground. And they're not your knees, are they? Whose knees exactly are they? But they're not yours. They don't belong to you. You were given them, as it were, by your parents, and they were given theirs by etc. etc. You can never find where your knees started. You were given them. They're to do with the genetic shape that you inherited. They're also to do with the food that you've eaten. If you hadn't eaten as a baby, if you hadn't taken in the solids from outside, you would never have got to getting knees. When you explore it, more and more your body is not yours. It doesn't belong to you. You don't own it. In fact, what you know about it is you're going to have to give it back. You've borrowed it, and you're going to have to give it back. You don't own it. It doesn't belong to you. So you can try to feel the body very strongly and think, and notice, say to yourself very subtly, it's not me, it's not mine. So when you cut your fingernails, which mine need cutting, I don't sort of think, oh no, I'm losing a bit of me, or when you go to the haircut, oh, me all over the place. You go to the loo, oh, God, I'm losing more me. So when you try to explore your experience, of course your body's not you. Yeah? Of course it's not you. And then you try to make that more subtle. So you then think, okay, what about my sense feelings? So the Buddhist word for this is Vedana. This sensation, inner sensation of pleasant, pain or neutral, are they mine? And you might then again just think, let me just feel them, but they're not me, they're not mine. So the heat in this room, for instance, that isn't yours, is it? It doesn't belong to you, that heat. And eventually, don't you, that you'll have to give that heat element back. It's not yours for keeps. You borrowed it. And so on. You try to get more and more subtle. You try to, quite difficult to sort of teach in a very brief way, but you try to look at your experience very, very closely and just remind yourself that it doesn't belong to you. It's not you, it's not yours. So when you feel your breath, it's not your breath that you're feeling, is it? You don't own it. And if you did, where does it start and where does it end? Do you still own it when you're not aware of it? Is it your breath? Your breath? What could that mean? Yeah. So you try to have more and more of a sense. What you're basically doing is challenging this sense, this innate sense, that this is definitely a me, and I own this me. This is my body, my feelings, my thoughts, my emotions, even things like my meditation. So you can even try to notice, even me sitting here, trying to bring my attention to that, that's not mine either. This isn't my meditation. You're trying to, this is only one approach of many, but you try to sort of, as it were, positively undermine this sense that you own yourself, that you're the owner of a somebody called me that really exists. And then if you think, no, but I definitely do exist, and that's what you'll find is you do all that and think, oh yeah, that's true. And then underneath it you think, yeah, but I definitely do exist. That's what I know. To go, yeah, the body, yeah, quite right. Oh yes, it comes and goes, and oh yes, breath, oh yes. And then underneath that, very, very quietly, if I listen, I think, yeah, but it's definitely me. There's definitely a me, no question. So try and get to that, there's definitely a me, this is definitely me, absolutely, surely, definitely me. And just think, okay, where is it? And is that, when I say where is it, is that bit me? Or is it what, try to explore that. There's definitely, absolutely, definitely a me. That's why getting bumped into is useful, because it makes that definitely a me flare up. And sometimes we don't notice it. That's why taking offence is useful, because you notice, oh, I really think there's a me here. One of the dangers you see of this internal way of working is that you mistake ideas about this, and you can get terribly clever about all this, for actual direct experience. And then somebody knocks into you as you try to get on a bus, and you get indignant. And that means you've still got a long way to go. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to do all of those four things. Practice the path of love, exteriorly and internally. Practice this path of wisdom, exteriorly and interiorly. The more that we do that, our life will feel richer and more fulfilling.